Love you, man. It's kind of hard getting things connected, though. It's kind of a little frustrating. So we're good to go. Golly, we're got quite a show. There's a lot of static on the other end. Dom, is that? Do you know how to get that fixed? We're getting a lot of feedback. That's better. That's better. Something is a little strange. We have with us again, as always, joining us from, I don't know if you still stateside or not, Major Burdock with us and typing into the Goldwater. Golly, Major, how are you coming through tonight?
I am here, Drew. I just got a little.
So I'm assuming we're good to go. The studio's connecting. I see that we're in. We're also with the Goldwater. So golly, yeah, we're connected. It's always fun tapping in. That's the hardest part of the whole broadcast, getting everybody on the same page. Tapping into the Goldwater is important. We have a lot of connections, and the miracle, it truly is a miracle that we can speak and literally be tapped into the whole world wide. It's kind of amazing. Thank you so much, Major, for being with us. Give us an update, if you can, about our friend Alex Redfoot, as he's known on the HN boards. I guess you had a chance to talk with him.
No, actually, I haven't been able to get a hold of him. I need to double check the number, the inmate number. I did manage to get some money over to him. So, but we're going to have to start anew on Monday, figuring out if I can get over and see him and get myself on a visitors list, so I can get in to see him next week before I leave.
So you are still in San Francisco?
At the moment, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, absolutely. That's cool. I don't know. Something is wrong. Of course, I was in Flagstaff last week, but before I left Flagstaff, I've said I sent another communication out in form of a letter to the address I was given. It was returned again. So either they're not allowing him to have any mail from me, or something is just strange. This whole thing, I'm telling you, it just absolutely reeks. It really does. The longer time it goes by, the more I'm deeply concerned for Alex's safety and well-being. I really am, because I got to tell you, and it's not being paranoid when you understand, as we talked about last week, the modus operandi of these individuals, these devious, dark people. I mean, it's just. I went back into my memory banks, my files, and as you know, Major, I've been broadcasting on various alternative radio stations for well over 20 years. I have quite a few shows under my belt, a lot of interviews with some very interesting people. I just went back and I'm thinking about my interaction with a gentleman by the name of, his pen name is Christopher Story. Oh my goodness. And I went back into my old computers and went in and looked at the things I'd stored away that Mr. Story had sent to me. If you'd ever heard of Christopher Story, ladies and gentlemen, his given name is Edward Hurl. He was incredibly right on point. I first started to know Mr. Story, as I'll call him, because of people in the financial industry, where I started out as well, being trained in Wall Street and other places. that his financial advising newsletter was doggone accurate. I mean, nobody can be 100% accurate, but Mr. Story's predictions were uncannily correct as far as global markets are concerned. I should say worldwide markets are concerned, because he really did have quite a network of, shall we say, well-informed people. And that's the biggest thing is correct information. So if that's okay, I want to just I wanted to go into a lot about what he sent to me. And I also sent him a lot of my writings. He was stunned by them. He says he wished he'd had them before he finished his book, the Underworld, the New Underworld Order, because he says I would have surely made a whole chapter on what you gave me. And that's okay. I sometimes you can know too much, and his book, The Underworld Order, is an incredibly accurate depiction from a Christian worldview of what's really going on in the world today. The question I have is, when I was on the other radio networks, Republic Radio, Republic Broadcasting Radio, the MicroEffect, and others, the question I have when I interviewed Mr. Story, and actually the first time I interviewed Mr. Story was on regular radio. I mean, broadcasting live. I had a sound engineer doing the board and the whole 9 yards, live radio. And his reports are just so stunning. They really, really were amazing, because he just told the truth. Now, Mr. Story, Mr. Hurl, really had a high place in the United Kingdom as far as credibility is concerned. He had regular audiences with Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and her whole cabinet. You just don't ascend to that level of debriefing unless you have some pretty doggone good resources behind you. And I was just so amazed whenever I would contact him, ask him, as long as I gave him a couple weeks notice, and as long as he had a schedule open, he was more than gracious to spend 2 hours with me and my audience. And he was so gracious in giving me the same respect as Margaret Thatcher in that circle of his influence. He thought it was extremely important. I just grieve. I'm fully convinced that Mr. Story was murdered. What really was upsetting to me when I got word that he died in 2010, I believe, was I had some enemies of mine that came out and accused me and a man named Don Nikoloff, who was also a radio talk show host and a good friend of mine, that we conspired to kill Christopher Story. That pernicious rumor went quite rampant. Of course, they had to say that I and Don Nikoloff were COINTELPRO agents. If Alex was here today, he would verify all of this, the incredible pernicious rumors that were going around concerning the death of Christopher Story. Just sad, absolutely sad. But what I want to bring out, and are you aware of Mr. Story's work, Major?
I'm actually, no, I'm not. I'm just getting caught up right now as you're speaking. So
Okay.
I will be up to speed in a moment here, sir.
Well, let me just take my hat off to him, and let me share with you Edwards, aka Christopher Story's last report. Doesn't really matter what we call him now. He is deceased. You can actually look up. There's quite a Wikipedia entry that's pretty accurate about him. Here is his last final report on July 10th of 2010. Okay. Let me take a deep breath here, because I really, really, really wish Alex was here to verify this. Because you see, at this time, Alex and I were both we were exposing this devious little woman named Jane Burgermeister, We call her Citizen Jane. She's not a citizen of the United States. She claimed to be. We outed her as an absolute disinformation expert who gained a whole lot of credibility for her British accent, right? That she was showing inside information about the lab created virus at Lake Mead or at Fort Meade, the biological warfare facility, et cetera, et cetera. It's a long story. Alex could say, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. But you see, here's his last report before he was killed. Dated Saturday, 10th July, 2010. U.S. cadre too cowardly, weak, and feckless to arrest Bush Sr., that's George Herbert Walker Bush, for financial terrorism and open-ended wanton mafioso sabotage. Okay, here's what he declared. CIA/MI6 of Great Britain, Obama/Bush Sr., Dick Cheney, ordered Christopher Story, aka Edward Hurl, assassinated, and are surprised and terrified that he is not dead. Obama and Bush spoken to by men with guns. This is what he wrote, and he documents the reasons why they wanted him dead. Now, Christopher Story comes out and comes down with a very quick illness. He comes to the United States on an invitation, and he died on July 14th, just 4 days after his story. And he I mean, it is what it is, ladies and gentlemen. I have no doubt he was hit with an incredibly potent virus, because believe it or not, in 2010, in March and April, Alex and I, and this is why Alex actually created his blog, labvirus.com. This is how it all started. If you go back and look at when he began to really put the word out with myself and the information, he was basically just a real supporter of the documentation that I brought out in 2010 in February and March of that year. And Christopher Story had received much of my intel. He verified it and actually did many reports on it as well. It's just, man, it's just sad that this happened. But I posted there on, he sent me a PDF file of his book that I think I just submitted, it's a must read. If you really want to know what's going on, this is from A to Z. It covers alpha to omega. I mean, it's beginning and the end of the entire story in a well processed book form. So Alex is one person that knows the story very well, and I'm not using a pun here. He knows the interaction, and yet he has been silenced too. I just don't seem, call me paranoid, Major, but if in fact his letter to me is accurate, I have no reason to believe it's not. Yeah, he's acting belligerent and strange, but that can be explained. There are neurotoxic substances that can do that. And you take a blood test or a breathalyzer and you have absolutely no alcohol in your bloodstream. I mean, Alex can tie one on. Like I know he can tip the bottle at times. I've seen that, but the next day he's back to him with maybe a hangover, a headache, but he's saying, I just had too much to drink. I apologize. That did not happen with his latest thing. And he was, when he had alcohol in his system. He was not abusive. He was just not coherent. And his personality was different on the show that night. Major, it was not, even when he was under the influence of alcohol, a little bit tipsy, he was still respectful, didn't overspeak, didn't use profanity and chew us out for having mukes, unmuted, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I'm talking about, Major?
Yeah, it was completely different, totally different, Alex. I'd never really seen anything like that to that extent ever. I think we were all shocked, all of us were. And I mean, I'm sure he sent you similar emails afterwards, and it continued. It continued for, I don't know. There wasn't any end to it. So, yeah, very troubling, very troubling.
And then, I gotta say, I don't think Alex ever had a gun. I never knew him to own a gun personally. I would say that the BB gun story is pretty accurate, but that's why I was hoping that you could find or talk. And the public defender has flat out not responded to me, and I've emailed her, said please give me probable cause statement. What weapon, if any, was confiscated? Please let me know as a friend. I'm totally ignored. I mean, like I'm getting nothing from this woman. I don't get it. Because
we should have some more next week. I did find a site where we can get online. They should have the booking report filed by now, and so I basically need to just double check his inmate number is what I need. But we'll get that sorted out next week.
Okay, please do, because I mean, I put out some feelers to people here in Utah that are really pro-gun, as I am, that I've told the story to, and they looked at me and says, you verify this case. If he actually had only a BB gun and is being held on $2 million cash-only bond, this is national news. This is international news. Okay, because why are they trying to target him? I mean, really, to come out and throw him down, separate his shoulder, handcuff him, haul him off to the hoosegow on private property, saying he's drunk and disorderly. How do you know unless you do, a blood test even there to know he's got alcohol in his system, or it's on order to do so? And there are people all the time that get drunk and belligerent in their private property. I mean, it just, unless he comes out and threatens the police, I don't know. It's just really, really a strange deal. Strange deal, completely. So, yeah, I just don't have a good feeling about this in light of my ongoing work with Edward Hurl, Christopher Story. And again, I just would challenge your readers to take a look at the book, The New Underworld Order, Triumph of Criminalism, Dark Actors Playing Games. Indeed. The Global Fantasies of the Geomasonic Illuminati. Now, Edward Hurl, aka Christopher Story, was this is not his only work. It's international bestseller, The European Union Collective, talking about the whole reasons behind the European Union, the EU, the new euro. Everything he wrote was pretty doggone accurate as far as the reasons behind that and steps toward total globalization. And he says, he told me on the phone, he says, yeah, it's not the New World Order, it's underworld. I mean, they're talking about a very organized criminal mafia connection. Now, the reason why I bring this out is a friend of mine sent me this entitled "This was too good not to share," and I agree. This is a great post. I want to just throw this out there. I want to have you jump in, Major, and let's talk about it, because sometimes we just kind of forget, or maybe just even ignorant about what really has been going on the last decade or so. Let me go. This is what the article writes, and I'm going to quote it verbatim. Remember when Donald Trump was business partners with the Russian government and his company? His company got $53 million USD from the Russian government investment fund called Rusnano that was actually started by a guy named Vladimir Putin. And Rusnano is also referred to as, quote, Putin's child. Oh, wait. That wasn't Donald Trump. It was John Podesta. My bad, as Rosanna Dana would say, you know. Never mind. Oh, but wait. Remember when Donald Trump received $500,000, United States dollars now, Federal Reserve notes, not rubles, for a speech given in Moscow and was paid for by a company called Renaissance Capital, a company tied to Russian intelligence agencies, ex-KGB in other words? Wait. Wait. Never mind that. That was William Jefferson, aka Bill Clinton. Oh, wait. Remember when Donald Trump approved the sale of 20% of U.S. enriched uranium to the Russians while he was Secretary of State, which gave control of it to the Rosatom, aka the Russian State Atomic Energy Corporation? Now, the Russian State Atomic Energy Corporation, you see, has close ties to the Republic of Iran. Where do you think Iran was getting enriched U.S. uranium? Oh, wait, that was... never mind, that was not Donald Trump. That was Hillary Rodham Clinton. Oh, well, wait. Remember when Donald Trump lied about that and said he wasn't a part of approving the deal that gave the Russians a full 1/5 of our uranium stores, but then his emails were leaked showing he did lie about it. Oh, wait. Thanks to Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, we know that it was now Hillary Clinton and John Podesta both. Remember when Donald Trump himself got 145 million Federal Reserve dollars from shareholders of the uranium company that he sold to the Russians? No, ladies and gentlemen, that was Hillary Clinton, and the Clinton Foundation was indeed paid $145 million. Not only did Clinton and Podesta give the uranium to the Russian Atomic Energy Corporation, they were paid $145 million. And these people are not in prison. They're not hanging from a scaffolding. You see. But wait a minute. Remember when Donald Trump accepted millions in donations from Russian oligarchs like the chairman of a company that's part of the Russian nuclear research cluster, the wife of the current mayor of Moscow, and a close pal, buddy of Vladimir Putin's? Oh, wait, that wasn't Donald Trump either. That was the Clinton Foundation, ladies and gentlemen. Remember when Donald Trump failed to disclose all those donations before becoming the Secretary of State, and it was only found out when a journalist went through Canadian tax records? Oh, yes, wait a minute. That was Hillary. Remember when Donald Trump told Mitt Romney that the 80s called and it wanted its Russian policy back, that the Cold War is over? No, that was President Obama, if you remember. That was during the presidential debate of 2012. Remember when Trump got caught on a hot mic telling the Russian ambassador he'd have much more flexibility after the elections. And the ambassador said he'd pass it on to Mad Vlad Putin. Oh, wait, that was Barack Hussein Obama, aka Barry Soetoro. Folks, emails, IG, servers, they have it all. All the evidence is there. And Julian Assange dared to print it out and to notify people, and he's persona non grata and looking to be, if he's caught, to be put away in prison. What's wrong with this picture? And as I added this, this is where I need to go with this, ladies and gentlemen. This is probably one of the most important broadcasts for you to get a handle on and sink your teeth into. Because you remember when Donald Trump used his contacts with the Russian/Jewish Bolshevik mafia dons to make hundreds of millions of dollars, getting the average Russian citizen hooked on American cigarettes? Oh, wait, that wasn't Donald Trump. That was Willard, who I call Willard the Rat, Mittens Romney, and Bain Capital's handler, Orit Gadish, the daughter of an infamous IDF Mossad general. All this while, Willard Mittens Romney, who was going to be the shoo-in from Utah as senator to replace Orrin Hatch, all right? All this while he was being a Mormon stake president in Boston, liberal enclave, right? And he's sitting as a Mormon stake president signing what's called temple recommends. But see, he won't sign a temple recommend until the person being interviewed promises and swears on a Book of Mormon that they don't smoke cigarettes or drink vodka from Russia. Folks, how does one spell HYPOCRITE? Now you know why Willard Mittens doesn't like Donald Trump. Now, jump on in there, Major. What do you think? What are you thinking?
I think one of the things that shocked me and really set off some bells, and of course it was immediately shot down by the media saying no, that doesn't exist, it wasn't true, was when Putin stood up just last week and said, hey, what about this 400 million that Hillary has? And he said, well, that it was donated to her campaign. Well, obviously, it wasn't in whole or part. We would have heard about that. But it's interesting that he's got a number, and he's not making anything up. I think it's a shot across her bow, and I think it's referring to stuff that we don't know about. I mean, you're talking about all the stuff that we know about. And those people, I mean, how many things don't we know about? How much money do they have socked away? And 400 million sounds like a feasible number when it comes to those folks. So, yeah, I hope that we're going to hear more on that. It sounds like there might be some more juicy stuff, or maybe it's just a combination of all the Uranium One and all of the other deals, all of the dirty stuff that her and Bill have done over the years. But yeah, that 400 million really kind of perked my ears up. I hope that we hear more about that.
Well, you surely will, and here's why. Here's why you will hear. And I'm gonna say it the way Christopher Story would say it, because we had this discussion. One of Christopher Story's favorite words was beware of the dialectic, the Hegelian dialectic. In other words, you have the thesis and the antithesis fighting each other for domination, and then you have the prescribed outcome already pre-planned. You see, I'm here to tell you guys, and Major, I hope you take this and take it with whatever grain of salt you need to take it. There is no difference between the cesspool of Donald Trump and the cesspool of Hillary Clinton. They're both from the same side of the swamp. Okay, you do not ascend to the position that you have in his medium, in his New York wealth without the sanction of the Russian/Jewish mafia connections, the kosher Nidra. Neither does Hillary Clinton. You don't come from Arkansas and sit there and suddenly get to be a senator from New York without the sanctioning of that mob. Now, and I want you to hold on to that thought, because if you really delve into Christopher Story's book, and I'm going to share with you more links, you'll see this is exactly how it works, how it breaks down. Bill and Hillary and there's no doubt they profited huge amount. The Clinton Foundation had 400 million plus that came from Russian sources. But see, what the media will not talk about, because of the dialectic, is exactly how the election was rigged for Trump. Now, that's the key thing here. Donald Trump himself didn't believe he was ever going to win. It was a shock to him. Ivanka was shocked. They were all shocked. This is well known in the circles. The GOP was quite shocked. So what happened? There's manipulation at the highest level, and it goes back to what Christopher Story was telling me, and this is why it's so important to get this across today about perestroika, what the ultimate agenda of the Russian-Chinese pact is all about. You see, the dialectic is all about this. You have the left screaming through the media about Russian meddling. You have Mueller and all, this probe that has unlimited funds to go and just get people at their throats. You got the left wanting to go out and just rebel and have a civil war, a literal civil war over Russian meddling. Russia pulled the strings. Then you have the conservative right wings that are saying Trump is this wonderful, wonderful savior. He's doing great things. Yeah, he is. It's a dialectic. Okay? It's very, very, very easy to see what Story was talking about in an interview I did back in 2007 with him. He said and I'll get into this other book that he actually helped publish. Well, I'll not just do it right now. I'm going to let's see. Yeah, why not? The Perestroika Deception is the name of the book. The author, Anatolia Golitsyn, author of the other incredible book, New Lies for Old. Anatoly Golitsyn's first book was a long-running sensation because, you can't ignore his accuracy. Who is Golitsyn? He's a top-level KGB man who defected. And he absolutely said, I defected because I see the future of mankind. He got asylum in the United Kingdom, and that's where he got to know Christopher Story. And Christopher Story, oh my goodness, he wrote the preface, the forward in the book, forward by the author, introduced by Christopher Story, editor and publisher of the Soviet Analyzer. Let me just read what Edward Story wrote in his forward. Says it all. It really does, and you see how it ties into what role the dialectic is having right now to divide America like never before. It's never been this polarizing. You have to admit that. I talk to people that are just like, we're going to start killing people if something doesn't change. If Trump is not impeached, we're going to start shooting people. I've heard that half a dozen times in the conservative state of Utah. I can't imagine what they're saying in San Francisco in the halls of Berkeley. Okay. Here's what Christopher Story wrote. It's just an amazing quote. This collection of my memoranda to the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, is about Soviet grand strategy and the new dimensions of the threat to Western democracies, including, of course, the United Kingdom and America, that they're two targets. Now, I got to preface that by saying my conversations, both privately and on the radio, were incredible because Story knew there were rogue agents in the CIA that were as bad could be, the absolute blackest of the black hats. But he made sure I knew that there were some good white hats in the CIA as well, and we're just trying to sort out the rogues, okay? And it's like the the old Mad magazine, Spy versus Spy, the black spy versus the white head spy. It's really that kind of a situation. So one of, yeah, I have to believe that Mr. Story, Mr. Hurl, was he knew who we could trust and who we couldn't trust. Okay, so he says, "quote There is a marked difference between the American and the communist use of the term strategy. Americans tend to think of strategy in short-range terms in relation to presidential election campaigns, right? And football or baseball games are in such instances as a strategy of stonewalling during the Watergate investigations. For Russian communists, on the other hand, strategy is a grand design or general party line which governs the party's actions over a very long period." We talked about this. What do you mean a very long period? The Bolsheviks overthrew the Tsar in 1917. He says, yeah, their design is multi-generational. As many as 5 generations. He says, I know from interviewing these agents of the KGB that is defected. They talk about multi-generational designs going as much as 150 years in the future. They leave nothing to chance, folks. The subsequent expansion of the communist camp and the final world victory of communism will take, they said, many generations. Doesn't happen in the short term. But see, that's the Western mindset is like, oh, well, we're victorious. We won. The Cold War is over. As Obama told Mitt Romney, right, in the presidential debate. Hey, I got a phone call from they want the 80s Cold War back. Come on. See, this from Obama, who is communist, okay? Socialist / communist. It's amazing, folks. So this book, The Perestroika Deception, this book shows that the essence of the special maneuver in the present grand strategy for communism lies internally in the creation and use of controlled political opposition to effect a transition to a new power structure which remain in reality completely communist controlled. In other words, don't be fooled by Vladimir Putin, who's one of the top agents of the KGB during this era. Don't be fooled, folks. Internationally, the essence of the maneuver lies in the use of the political potential of these new power structures to develop contacts and promote solidarity with the Western democracies as a means toward the achievement of world communist victory through the convergence of the dialectic, the communist and non-communist systems. This is what I'm sorry, this is not what Story wrote. This is the foreword by the author of why he wrote the book. Now get this. The main purpose of my defection at the end of 1961. Now, go back to the 1961. I was 2 years old then, folks. I was a 2-year-old toddler, probably just walking around. But who was in the White House? Okay, think about this. He defected in the end of 1961. My purpose was A, to warn the American government about the adoption of the current grand strategy for communism and the political role of the KGB in the use of disinformation and controlled political opposition, which the strategy entailed, and B, to help the West neutralize KGB penetration of their governments. On arrival in Washington, D.C., again, he defected to the United Kingdom through the British Secret Service. He went in and received asylum. The British government then allowed him to come on to Washington. He says, on arrival to Washington, I asked to be received by President Kennedy. I was assured by General Taylor, the president's security advisor, that the president would indeed see my appropriate contributions. Mr. Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General, told me personally that in due time, a meeting with the president would be arranged. And he gives a copy here of General Taylor's letter, dated 21st December 1961. Dear Mr. Golitsyn, I have your letter of December 19th, 1961. So it was answered 2 days after received address to the President of the United States. The subject matter is one of considerable interest to this government, and your request has received careful consideration. I wish to assure you that the officials with whom you are now in contact have the full authority and responsibility for handling matters of this nature, and I therefore request that you give them your complete cooperation. I have asked that I be kept informed of developments in this matter, and you may be confident that information concerning your contribution will be brought to the attention of the President if and when appropriate. Signed, Maxwell D. Taylor, National Security Advisor to the White House. So while waiting for the meeting with President Kennedy, I limited my cooperation with the CIA, FBI, and allied services to the problems of KGB double agent penetration of the American, British, and French governmental institutions. After President Kennedy's assassination, I then briefed the head of the CIA. Okay, that's the Fox Garden, the head house, because George Herbert Walker Bush was now the head. And the head of that agency's counterintelligence staff about communist long-range strategy, the creation of a disinformation department, and Shelepin's reorganizing the KGB into a political arm of the Communist Party. It goes on, folks. I tell you, in 1984, I published a book called New Lies for Old about communist strategic political disinformation. In the book and in my memoranda, which is footnotes, I made several significant predictions about future developments in the communist world. I predicted the communist strategists would go beyond Marx and Lenin and would introduce economic and political reforms in the USSR and Eastern Europe. I predicted the legalization of solidarity in Poland, Lech Walesa, remember him, the return to democratization in Czechoslovakia, and the removal of the Berlin Wall. This is 1984, ladies and gentlemen. And again, I have the book, New Lies for All, on my shelf. He's right on point. I warned about a political offensive to promote a neutral socialist Europe which would work to Soviet advantage. I also warned that the West was acutely vulnerable to the upcoming major shift in communist tactics. It remains also a fact that leading Soviet experts like Mr. Zbigniew Brzezinski failed to make accurate predictions about these developments. This failure on the part of Brzezinski and other experts in Washington were noticed by an independent observer in the New York Times of his article dated 12 September 1989, etc., etc., etc. And on it goes. And I don't have the time to go into all of his letters. He wrote this preface in 1995. And so the editor, the one that got this perestroika deception published, is Christopher Story. Here's what the foreword by Mr. Story says. In July 1991, I was asked by the former British Prime Minister, Mrs. now Lady Thatcher, to see her at her room in the Palace of Westminster. The subject we discussed was the network of bilateral treaties, declarations, and accords which the Soviet Union had been signing with leading Western countries. By then, the list of such signatories already included Germany, France, and Italy, while a treaty had just been negotiated between the USSR and Spain, and a political declaration had been signed inter alia by the Soviet Union and Finland. Germany had in fact signed 2 bilateral treaties with Moscow. I had carried out a preliminary analysis of these treaties and accords and had published translations of their texts and some early findings in several documents issued by my serials, his magazines, publishing firm in London, placing the treaties in the context of the implications of the Joint Declaration of 22 States and the Charter of Paris, which Mrs. Thatcher had signed on 19th November 1990, amid all the disruption and anxiety surrounding the challenge to her leadership. At our meeting, the former Prime Minister expressed great interest in the texts of the treaties and in my explanations of their significance. After admitting that her officials had not, during their final weeks in office, informed her about them, our conversation then broadened to include my developing assessment of Soviet strategy in general and the Soviet agenda for Europe in particular. When I had finished debriefing as best I could that Soviet behavior and what I understood of Moscow strategy bore familiar Leninist Hegelian dialectic hallmarks, Mrs. Thatcher remarked, quote, "I don't think Gorbachev is a Leninist anymore." My goodness. Later in the interview, after she had become aware of my acquaintance with Anatolia Golitsyn's work, New Lies for Old, and after hinting that she did not share Golitsyn's analysis, the former Prime Minister pronounced, "I don't think we have been deceived. At least, I hope we haven't." These remarks have haunted me ever since. Obviously, the qualifying afterthought had revealed that the Prime Minister, whose action opening the door ajar had enabled the Soviets to thrust it wide open for the purpose of exporting their insidious perestroika deception to the West, and had retained a niggling doubt that the West might indeed have fallen victim to Soviet strategic deceptions. That she was prepared even to admit such a doubt is a tribute to her inherent intellectual integrity and strength of character. It is more than can be said for most of the West leaders today. Have completely allowed Gorbachev and his successors and collaborators to restructure their minds in accordance with the true meaning of the word perestroika itself. The restructuring not of the Soviet system, but of the outlook, thinking, and mentality of the West as a whole. For Stalin, perestroika meant reshoeing as of a horse, that is to say, not of the regime itself, but of the system's means to consolidate its power. Greatly, though Lady Thatcher is to be admired, it is unfortunately the case that she was never the best judge of character. Reviewing the former Prime Minister's book, The Downing Street Years, in the New York Times Book Review section on 14th November 1993, Dr. Henry Kissinger drew attention to the passage in which the former Prime Minister described her reaction on meeting Gorbachev for the first time. Thatcher wrote, "If at this time I had paid attention only to the content of Mr. Gorbachev's remarks, largely the standard Marxist line, I would have to conclude that he was cast in the usual communist mold. But his personality could not have been more different from the wooden ventriloquism of the average Soviet apparatchik. He smiled. He easily smiled. He laughed, used his hands for emphasis, modulated his voice, followed an argument through, and was a sharp debater. His line was no different from what I would have expected. As the day wore on, I became to understand that it was the style far more than the Marxist rhetoric which expressed the substance of the personality beneath. End quote. In this passage, says Dr. Kissinger had evidently realized Lady Thatcher had admitted that she had been beguiled by Gorbachev's style. As he cast his spell, Gorbachev unlocked the key to the control of the Western mind and to the restructuring of the entire world. The West followed Lady Thatcher's prompting, mistaking the style for the substance. The disastrous consequences of this millennial error are now crowding in upon Western civilization, threatening its very survival. Ambition to control the Western mind is a long-standing objective of Soviet policy. Embracing the ideas of the Italian communist Antonio Gramsci, who argued that mastery of human consciousness should be a paramount political objective. And as Richard Pipes has pointed out in his book Survival is Not Enough, Simon & Schuster, New York, 1984, such mastery is secured in the first place by control of the organs of information. Folks, this is why we talk about the need for alternative media. The mainstream media is absolutely controlled by a select group of people that are, I'm telling you, this is the tribe in which these Russian oligarchs. Gorbachev is Jewish, ladies and gentlemen. Let's be flat out what it is. Lenin, Marx, Stalin, Karl Mordecai, changed his name to Karl Marx. Communism is a Jewish institution. You have to understand that. It's not being anti-Semitic to tell the truth on this subject. Control the organs of information. They've got that, folks. The objective is to control thought at the source. Let me repeat that. The objective is to control thought at the source, that is, in the mind that absorbs and processes the information. And the best way of accomplishing this is by shaping the words and phrases in the desired manner. Moreover, control of the Western mind is to be achieved not only by means of the dishonest use of language, but also through operations to demoralize the West, through corrosive attacks on society's institutions, the active promotion of drug abuse, and the spread of agnosticism, nihilism, permissiveness, and concerted attacks on the family in order to destabilize society. Get the picture, folks? We got 5 minutes to break. This is amazing. And let's just, what can I say? Major, jump in. Let's go to break.
Yeah, I mean, we're just tying that up with Facebook and the controls over there. And I see we've got 2 minutes. Okay. How I think I'm reading more and more about. Of course, you've got mass media right now, and you need to have that controlled as well. I mean, outside of the mind, that's some scary stuff, Dr. True. That's just man. But then again, I mean, we're seeing it in the educational system. I mean, look, we just basically got our first batch of true mind-controlled people that have gone through this warped educational system that is promoting all of this openness but this tolerance, and yet there is no tolerance for anything anymore. It's do as we think and think as we think. Otherwise, you're going to be totally ostracized and you'd be threatened with violence, or be threatened. Your life will be threatened. It's amazing what's going on right now. So, yeah, I mean, and we're seeing that splay out in Facebook and Twitter and all of the shadow banning that's happening right now. I'll pass you a link, which will be really interesting. I don't know if you use Twitter or social media that much, Dr. True, but
I do not.
Oh, you know what? I mean, it would be interesting for you to have an account and just do a couple of things on it to see how quickly you get shadow banned. And we've got a real easy way to find out. But I mean, just as an experiment, I bet you wouldn't last a week, if
Well,
that.
I wouldn't. You're right. I mean, it's mind control. It really truly is, and that's what I said last week. It's not a matter of finding out who is mind controlled. It's such a few people that aren't. You know, and this is why Alex was so, so amazed at this so-called flat Earth movement, because you can see it with your eyes. You can notice the water is level. Water is level, 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 level. You know, and you read the Ptolemy, the work of Ptolemy in the first century AD, and the usage of Euclidean geometry. My goodness, we're out of time. We'll come back after this messages. Don't go away. tell you that first hour, it seemed like 5 minutes. I apologize. It just I get really animated about this topic because I see it so clearly. I do. There's just so few people in the world that I can really believe is have their pulse on it. And Edward Hurl, Christopher Story was, in my estimation, such a man. I thought the same way of William Bill Cooper. Bill Cooper, bless his heart, Navy intelligence whistleblower, etc. He did have, he had so much stress. He did go tipping the bottle, and he did, he escaped into the whiskey bottle, no doubt about it. He admitted it. He says, I need to. Only way I can relax and even sleep. And I can understand Alex, wanting to have a bender once in a while to relax with all the stressors he's under. No family really to support him, no significant other to be with, and just friends in his world there. That I just feel so bad that he's incarcerated, and who knows what's going on in his life. I mean, he's wide open to anybody that can do some bad things to him. I fear for him. I really do. Major, thanks again for coming on the show. Again, shouts out to the Goldwater Network and those listening in on HN. Again, we need to make people aware that this broadcast originates on Revolution Radio, completely and totally surviving on donations from listeners like yourself. We have no corporate sponsorship, so please feel free to donate what you can when you can. We surely appreciate that. Okay, golly, Major, I want to share Gordon Duff's story in Veterans Today. This is one of the first stories I ever read about Mr. Duff. I became an incredible fan of Mr. Duff's because of that. Because he was so right on. I invited him to come on the show with me, and we set up a few times that he was going to come on, and just never did materialize for whatever reason. There were things that just happened, et cetera, but I got to share this. Feel free to jump in. Gordon Duff is that you don't know, he's being demonized as an anti-Semitic troll type of person. Okay, he's a senior editor of the group Veterans Today. He's so on point. He really is. He's a Marine, Semper Fi, combat veteran of the Vietnam War. He is a disabled veteran, worked on veterans and prisoner of war issues for decades. Gordon is an accredited diplomat. He had diplomatic credentials, folks, and is generally accepted as one of the top international intelligence specialists. He manages the world's largest private intelligence organization, regularly consults with governments challenged by security issues. So this is Gordon Duff. Let me read to you what he said, because this is so on point. Yeah, want anything to say before we get into Gordon Duff's article?
No, fire away. I'm actually playing catch up here on online, and this is just fascinating going through and listening in and researching a lot of things I didn't know. So please fire away, Dr. True.
Okay, so when I said in the first hour about Willard, I call him Willard the Rat Mittens Romney. I've been following this story so long, and I was commenting it on the Story Behind the Story radio broadcast about what was going on as the so-called fall of the Soviet Union, under Gorbachev, etc. Now, this is so right on point. You gotta handle this, folks. You gotta get a handle on what he's saying. Gordon Duff wrote this clear back when Romney was positioning to go into, to get the nomination, the GOP nomination to go against Obama. Here's what he writes. The GOP organized cigarette smuggling into Russia through Poland in late 1990 and early 1991, paying off KGB operatives in Russia. Cigarette sales in Russia were a method then of supplying income for certain disabled veterans, as cigarette kiosks were a perk of military service and a method of survival by many. Now, as you go through this, understand that Gordon Duff knows exactly what he's talking about. He's part of it. He was there with them. He says initially cigarettes came from vending companies in the U.S., then were shipped in 20-foot containers into Gdansk, Poland, and then trucked into Russia over the Polish border, where the profits were split with the KGB. The first few shipments were all Marlboros and traded for vodka, which was shipped and then offloaded in Chicago. Where it went from there, who knows? The KGB, in turn, arranged for Soviet bankers to tour the United States with Republican Party hosts and CIA security. Arrangements were made to set up a worldwide money laundering operation. I think we know who runs that. Word was already out that the Soviet Union was down to its last days. The commercial banks of Leningrad, Moscow, the Ukraine, Belarus, Latvia, and Estonia made deals with the members of the GOP to split their assets. Money, meaning in the form of rubles, removed from Russia, have to go to who? The Bush family and GOP party leaders. The other half to be kept for the KGB, who would be invited into the United States to run the Russian mafia. And get this, take over heroin distribution through the communities they would establish in Brighton Beach, Little Odessa. Now, I had many shows with Michael Ruppert, Cop versus CIA. Michael Ruppert was part of the Los Angeles LAPD drug enforcement task, and he would absolutely be stunned when he was LAPD drug task team leader, that there were certain individuals that were the biggest of the big drug dealers, and they were hands-off. They were untouchables. Well, who's the big mob boss in LA? Same as the same big mob boss in Florida, the same big mob boss, in Mena, Arkansas, the Rose Hill Law Firm. It all goes back to a certain family. And it's the Bolshevik family structure through, again, New York families. So here it goes. You got to connect the dots here. Money laundering began through Cyprus, where organized crime had taken a strong foothold and moved through accounts in Switzerland and the Caymans to selected banks in the U.S. Some in Denver, some in Detroit, and the major one in Astoria, New York. Okay, you follow me? The former home of the Steinway Piano Company. The first cigarette deals were negotiated by old-time CIA, accompanied by national leaders of the GOP. Just by accident, I, Gordon Duff, attended more than one of those meetings, and I don't even smoke. I remember that thousands of cigarette machines would be offered also, but were refused. Russians felt they could never be secured. Meetings were also then held between the GOP, the CIA, and Diebold. Diebold, the company accused of aiding in the rigging of voting machines. Folks, no, they weren't accused, they did it. Diebold wanted a foothold in Soviet Russian banking. I remember Diebold talking about ATM machines and the Soviets responding that they had only recently decided to using teller windows. You just don't forget that level of irony. As I remember, I sat through those also. The bank deals were cemented during a private fundraiser at the Pierre Hotel in New York. Now, folks, I talked about it. Guess who was one of the big wigs at the Pierre Hotel fundraiser? You got Mr. Donald Trump. See, folks, you got to remember what I'm saying. they're both sides of the swamp, okay? It's dialectic. It's thesis versus antithesis, and nothing changes. The outcome is the end result is America's weakened and America falls. Gordon writes, I remember sitting between a key U.S. senator responsible for overseeing banking issues and the lobbyist for this new partnership. The evening was an interesting mix of major corporations and maid guys filling the room. There are photos. I have photos. Nobody was careful. Now here's the key point, folks. The critical issue is to be clear on is that the cigarette deal had little to do with cigarette companies and all to do with enriching GOP leaders who financed their retirement, huge homes, yachts, boats, all of it with laundered stolen cash from Russia. Profits from cigarette deals and cemented a partnership with the Russian mafia, which would later be supplanted with deals run through Kosovo and Albania. Even more vicious criminals, less cultured and more conveniently located for managing the world's heroin business. And folks, where you have the world's heroin business and the drug trade, you also have human trafficking. You have the Pizzagate scandal. Where do you think the blue-eyed blonde kids come from? Lithuania, ladies and gentlemen. This is why Camp Bondsteel was built, one of America's largest overseas bases, to channel heroin from, at that time, Turkey, vis-a-vis starting out from Afghanistan, into Turkey, into Western Europe, and the United States. So the question being asked now, and this is 2012 when he wrote this, the question being asked now is how a Mormon can represent big tobacco. When the real question is why would a Mormon open hundreds, even thousands of numbered bank accounts in safe havens and work hand in hand with organized crime? Then again, a detailed study of both the CIA and the FBI lends itself to tales of the so-called Mormon Mafia and their stranglehold on those organizations, the CIA and the FBI, you see. Indeed, look no further than General Brent Scowcroft, National Security Advisor under Bush and Reagan, and you see what I'm talking about. It doesn't get any deeper than that, folks. Anyone who comes against the Mormons and lives in the Western United States knows what real terrorism is like. Thank you, Mr. Duff. I know what real terrorism is like. I know. Believe me, I know. I got to say, right on. This was, again, published. He wrote this in October 23rd, 2012. If you want, I'll put this article directly into the chat line too. It is that important. Okay, so are you with me, Major?
Yeah, and I mean, the thing that surprises me so much about this is it used to be if you were doing things like this, it would be kept so secret, and if it got out, you'd be crucified. The public would crucify you on it. And it just, I mean, the shocking thing is like, you just mentioned Mina, and I'm just thinking, how on earth are these people not in prison and not, I mean, and I guess, I mean, it's more of a rhetorical question because I truly believe that the currency that we talk of Pizzagate, but it's Pedogate or whatever you want to call it. that's the reason. That's why. Because it's the ultimate currency. It's the ultimate wealth, and you can get away with anything. And they're behaving like they can. It's so brazen. It's absolutely insane what they're doing. And and of course, I truly believe that the next frontier is and it's already in place, and it may be too late, is the mass surveillance and collection of information on people. And once you got that, then you've got everybody. But yeah, I mean, it's appalling that this goes on, and it's just amazing how you're tying all of these things together, and it makes complete sense to me, Drew.
Well, I go to the moral compass of America has been the Christian pastors, the pulpit. It really has been, especially that in the non-denominational world that's not controlled by a group of theocrats, okay, theologians, right, that have a specific agenda too. I mean, whether it's Mormonism or Roman Catholicism, there's just bad isms, okay, that have an agenda. And so it really, really bothers me when, I had Pastor Jim Catlin on the show, and I tell you, him and I are as about as far apart and combative as we could ever be. And I thought 2 years ago he was my close and dear friend. The reason being he's come out and strongly made his opinion clear that I am nothing but a crazy conspiracy theorist. There is no possible way that anything so big and so widespread could possibly be real. Now, I don't blame Jim personally for that. He's a victim of the mainstream media mindset that pushes that completely. You want to believe in the Illuminati? You're nuts. You want to believe that this is all big? You're just a big. Here's your tinfoil hat. Okay, and it's all began with the debate on the so-called Edward Hendry. I won't use the word flat Earth. It's biblical cosmology because it really does go into that mindset. Look who really has been pushing that since Copernicus, the Jesuit Big Bang, the Jesuit order. And you go back and if you, I really challenge you to read Christopher Story's book from cover to cover, print out page by page, and you'll understand exactly how the agenda works. Because you see, if you're buying into a great delusion, one great delusion makes your mind easier to follow. Because Jim said this, Jim Catlin. Oh, there's no way that NASA could be perpetrating all of this massive hoax. Even, my mindset before reading Edward Hendry's book was like, this is ridiculous. It doesn't matter. And I'm pretty wide open to considering, being myself to be open-minded. But as wait a minute, I said, water is flat. I gotta tell you, there's just people either get it or they don't, and the level in which they don't get it, I'm convinced, is the level at which their minds have been programmed by the mainstream media. Going back to the days of Disney as a kid, Walt Disney's stories that we were subject to in grade school about how the Earth is part of this solar system and how we're going to travel to the moon. I mean, the docudrama of Walt Disney in the 1950s about how the Apollo would fly to the moon. It was the studio that did that was as believable as what we witnessed on TV in the 1960s. I mean, it's like, oh man, and Walt Disney, Walt Disney had Werner von Braun on the Wonderful World of Disney a number of times going into the space travel is Werner von Braun. And here is part of the whole book under the Himmler hex. Whole section of Christopher Story's books exposes Werner von Braun as a monster he is. Oh, the book is amazing, folks. When you see how that ties into the space agenda, who NASA is, why they're all geomasonic, 33rd degree and higher Masons. When I bring this out to Jim Catlin, Jim says, well, Masons aren't so bad. Jim, you know, there's either good or there's evil. Okay, there's no lukewarm here. You're either, part of the problem or part of the solution. If you're lukewarm, the Savior says in the scriptures, he'll spit you out of his mouth. You either understand the children are being, there's predators preying on children and bringing them in human trafficking, or you just ignore it. You just can't be lukewarm in this issue. You can't. Because you see, in Perestroika, the book, that's exactly what the Soviet strategy is, to make Americans lukewarm. Do you get that? You got to get that, listeners. You got to understand that. If you're lukewarm, the Soviets and their strategy and the communist strategy has worked. Now, I don't know how long I'll be able to broadcast. I may be in a boat like Alex. I don't know. I am just one man. I have a voice, and I will tell the way I see it and speak the truth as I see it. Okay? I honor the memory of Christopher Story. I never had the chance to meet the man. He wanted to meet me. We had many conversations. I respected him completely, and I must say, he helped me define myself as a Christian. He really did. He was that strong an understanding of the Christian faith in a beautiful way. I look back and I think, wow, I was a wandering generality as far as trusting the Bible until I really read a lot of what Christopher Story had told me. I owe him a debt of gratitude for help. I says, I got to trust the Bible. And he's right on. See, that's the message. We have all of these so-called Christian groups that are just like, we got to coexist. We got to allow the pagan religions. We got to allow Wicca. And we can all survive together. We got to love each other. Folks, no. Christianity is exclusive because of this one thing. The message of Christ is exclusive. Think about it. There's no other leader. I mean, Buddha might have been a great leader, even though he had a chubby little belly. I don't know. I mean, all these the Muslim leaders and the Prophet Muhammad, with all due respect, hey, he never made a claim that he resurrected from the dead, that he beat the grave. Christianity is exclusive to that. Either Jesus was crucified and resurrected and born again, or he is not. Okay, you have to decide that factor. If it's all a hoax, a scandal, okay, then the world is in deep, deep trouble, because you know what? The darkness, the satanic forces that Christopher Story outlines are very real. If you believe that they're not real, then go ahead and believe there's not human trafficking, that pedophilia is not rampant, that Pizzagate is just a wild conspiracy theory, like many Christians do. Or they click their tongues and say, I'm not going to get involved. I can't make a difference anyway. Again, chalk one up for perestroika, because that's exactly what the fifth column wants to have happen. Apathy, unbelief, lukewarm, I don't care, I don't give a rat's behind. That, to me, Major Burdock, is the biggest problem facing America today.
Oh, yeah. I heard something that was, I got to thinking about it, and I can't remember exactly. I think it was someone giving a speech. But the idea was is just because there's you're speaking of Christianity, and just because we have freedom of religion and people are allowed to worship as they please, doesn't mean that there aren't bad religions. I think people somehow think that just because it's a religion, it's got to be good somewhere, and so it's all somehow good. I submit to you that there are bad religions. And I mean, people need to be aware of this. That there are religions out there. Obviously, you know, I mean, if you're taking something and Jim Jonesing it, you're going to get what you need there, as it being clear that it's not good. But I'm telling you that this concept of people saying, well, Muslims are practicing a religion of peace, and I don't see a lot of that. I really don't. Now, it can be argued that, hey, listen, look at the Crusades, or, you know, or look at basically a lot of war and turmoil being sourced somehow around religion. But I think in its modern form, right today, people should really step back and take a look at how, you know, the fact that religions aren't equal when it comes to goodness. And you know, certainly, you know, I'm just speaking from the standpoint of a Christian. I mean, obviously, I've got a jaded point of view, but that's just something that it seems to be in modern society right now, and it's just in people's heads, and it kind of, it's been bothering me lately. This kind of respect. I mean, I think it's, in some situations, it's downright scary to have people walking around that, you know, head to toe, totally shrouded, and just with, you know, their face completely covered. I mean, and there's situations where they shouldn't be allowed to do that, like walking into a bank. I mean, why should you scare the hell out of a teller, or, you know?
Good point.
You know, I mean, and it's kind of creepy when an elevator door opens and you've got somebody, especially if somebody who's really tall is head to toe in one of these burqas. And it's just like, okay, you know, wear it at home, I guess. But and, you know, surprisingly, France is actually getting on the bandwagon with that, which is interesting. They're banning burqas on beaches and other public places, as well. They should, you know. I think that they should. And this other concept of, you know, that's invading Switzerland, which, you know, they finally put their foot down and said, hey, we're not going to tolerate this. You know, this is the end of it. Because when I lived in Switzerland, went to school there, every morning when you get to class, you shake the hand of the professor. That's what they do. And it's basically, they treat you, it's a show of respect. They're treating you as a peer. And that's almost as an equal in that classroom. And every class does it. Every single class, you shake their hand. And of course, there was a female teacher and a Muslim immigrant, I think from Syria, who refused. And the teacher said, well, they'll get the hell out. If you're not going to do that, then don't come to class. And so there was a lawsuit, of course, over it. And they finally stuck to their guns and said, okay, you know, if you're not going to follow at least that, and which is like interesting, because that's the baseline of civility. It's almost the definition that you're shaking someone's hand and they're refusing to do it. And I submit to you that that's a bad religion. That's a bad thing to do in modern society. And it's alienating. And the concept that this perestroika that is being oozed out and all over, almost just rubbed all over the world like a bad lotion, it's extremely troublesome. And you know, people's reaction to religion is just one of many things that you're talking about today. But that's something that I've been thinking about all week.
Well, that's the Communist plank of the manifesto: wipe out religion. And there's a reason why the communist Bolsheviks, the communist horde, whether it's Mao's China, you look at really who brought in communism to them, it's the same group of people. It's why they hate and will absolutely kill people that smuggle in New Testaments. See, they just got to control that part of the truth. It's okay to bring in the Quran. It's okay to bring in the Book of Mormon. It really is. They're not threatened by that, because, you see, here's what I wanted to bring out. Most people don't realize this, but if you're really understanding Mormon history, Brigham Young, okay, who was a cousin of founder of Mormonism, Joseph Smith, and the whole family were tied in to. They were what I call crypto Jews. They were of rabbi families. Okay, they were Brigham Young and uh, others of the early Mormons were very much tied into rabbinical family lines. Okay, you go back into the gentleman. He was one of the original apostles of Joseph Smith's form. He was uh, his name was Orson Hyde. Do the research. Orson Hyde was a rabbi who joined Mormonism. He's still a rabbi, still Jewish. He went on direct orders from Joseph Smith's God, who was giving him revelations through a peepstone, a scrying necromancy, to go to Palestine at the time and there dedicate the city of Jerusalem and the Holy Land for the return of the Jews, which are not really Jews, they're Khazars. Okay, they're not of the bloodline of Abraham at all, but that doesn't matter. They go and because of the God that they're worshiping, they make it happen. Now, who's the God of Mormonism? Well, the God of Mormonism is not Jesus of Nazareth. It's the other guy, folks. I'm just telling you. I know from which I speak. I'm born and raised in Mormonism. It's just flat out. And here's the reality. Read the discourses of Brigham Young. Brigham Young instituted in Utah what was called the United Order. The precepts of the United Order was everybody held everything in common. There was nobody had any more than anybody else. And Brigham Young, it was right out of Karl Marx's manifesto. It was pure and simple communism. Now, because of statehood issues, because of polygamy issues, and yada yada, the Mormon United Order had to kind of go into hiding, but it's not been abandoned because it is communism. Now you see why you have people like Willard Mittens Romney and the Bush family so tied into the communist manifesto Jews that are pushing this worldwide. It is who they are. They are the same sides of the same coin, folks. You just hide it very well. Talk about perestroika, you see, and that's the reality. When I used to teach in Mormonism a subject called gospel doctrine. I had a chance to go in and I went outside of the approved lesson manual and just did a analysis of the United Order, and people. I just laid it out there. I didn't make any judgment calls, but I had so many people say, that can't possibly be accurate. This is absolute communism. I said, well, don't kill the messenger. This is absolutely true. It's part of early Mormon history, the United Order. There's a town in southern Utah called Orderville. It's named after the United Order. And Brigham Young prophesied in the name of his God that this order would fill the entire world. That's their God, you see. Oh my goodness. And when you see Brent Scowcroft, other people, other Mormons of this nature that are absolutely tightly in league with the Jewish Bolshevik movement, the nihilism, you see where it comes. And then, it to me, the dots connect so well, and it's clear to see who really the deep state is, what the deep state is, and really what Donald Trump is really all about. He has a role to play. I'm not sure to what level he's consciously aware of it, but the man is a swamp rat, folks. It's just a simple way it is. I hope I'm wrong. Maybe God can work through the swamp rat too. I don't know, but I'll be highly surprised if there's not going to be an outbreak, a major civil war breakout, unless cooler heads prevail. I mean, I said in the Skype chat line there, I made the point. One of the things that Story and I did talk about in depth in 2006, 7, 8 was the perestroika projections in the book, and his own analysis, which was amazingly the same thing. He said, I see that this will erupt in the streets of the UK and America almost simultaneously into a major shooting war where there'll be such a loss of life, almost like you see in the American Civil War of the 1860s, right? That people will be screaming for the Russians and the Chinese to come and restore order. The Chinese on the West Coast, the Russians on the East Coast. You know, that movie Red Dawn, same thing there, except the difference is the American military is saying, we can't handle it. We need help. We need help. Again, that is the outcome. See, that is the synthesis of the thesis and the antithesis. Tell me that I'm wrong, folks. Like I said at the outset, I see such polarity, such anger, such hostility on the left and right that's really never been there before. And look at what we have. I want to touch on this too, because it does tie into what Story wrote in the Underworld Order. Do you realize this is headlines from the Washington Post? Pretty good mainstream rag, July 11th of this year. The writer's name is William Wan. The headline is, every current Supreme Court justice attended one of two schools, Yale or Harvard. Now, isn't that just amazing? That's a problem, headline reads, say decision-making experts. The article says, it is not hard to see similarities between President Trump's last two Supreme Court nominees. They are both white male conservatives who attended Ivy League law schools, clerked for retiring Justice Anthony Kennedy, and went to the same exclusive private prep school. The elite background does not end just with them. If the Senate approves Trump's nominee, Brett Kavanaugh, every justice sitting on the Supreme Court will have either attended Yale or Harvard's law school. The shared elite backgrounds of Supreme Court justices, some experts say, is a disadvantage because scientific research shows the more diverse the group, the better the decisions they make. Groups with vastly diverse members are smarter, more creative, make fewer errors, and show increased problem-solving abilities, according to multiple studies across the fields of psychology, business, and organizational and behavioral science. Quote, the elitism on the Supreme Court is horrifying, said Benjamin Barton, a law professor at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. Go Vols, right? Quote, from the age of 18, these people have all essentially done the same thing, followed the same path, run in the same cloistered circles, and that's not healthy.
Well, and they've had the same professors too. So
there you go.
Their background is those professors there are ensconced. A lot of those guys are teach into their 70s and adjunct up until they're 80, and you know, they're ensconced. And take a look at the intelligence community in Yale. What's going on there? I mean, that's like 80% of your recruitment is out of there for the people, the powers that be, and the people who are chosen to come into that whole society. And I don't think that it's any, you know, the whole concept of the skull and bones, and you have to be part of not only just Yale, but this really tight-knit, secretive community, even when you're in college, and with the secret rituals and this secret thing. So that, and I totally agree that, I mean, it would make sense. I mean, I want a guy that, you know, the University of Arkansas, you know, there's some smart people out there that went to mediocre schools, and that doesn't seem to be in the whole group think at the moment. And one thing, getting back to Red Dawn and the Civil War, I don't think it's outlandish. I'm remembering that the very beginning of that movie where the professor is giving his speech, and the paratroopers start coming in.
Right.
Well, that was like it was a movie when I was a teenager that I don't know, for some reason I was living in Idaho, and we had lots of guns. We did a lot of hunting, and I almost kind of wanted that to happen. I don't know why. When you're a teenager, you just, you feel like you can take on the Russians in the 80s, during the Cold War. But the one thing I don't understand, though, and I truly see it happening, especially here, there is just no doubt that they do want to go to war, except they're putting on black hoods and masks and beating the hell out of people they shouldn't be beating the hell out of, and trashing storefronts and damaging utility boxes and preventing ambulances from getting to A to B, and people are dying on the way. But I don't get how the Antifa, which is like certainly the people who are classified as a domestic terror organization, but I don't see how they're going to possibly win, because they want to go to war with people who have all the guns. So I'm not sure how that civil war is going to work. I mean, and the other thing too is most of the people who are on the right, who I guess what they're calling Nazis, they also overwhelmingly are landowners. So and protect their land. You've got more of a chance of finding landowners in between these two groups, and gun owners on one distinct side of this entire war that I see breaking out. So I'm not sure how they're going to do it. They may resort to terrorist tactics and blowing themselves. These people are so batty right now. I think that it's not beyond the realm of what, I don't know if you call it thinking, but it's not beyond their realm to kind of maybe adopt that and say, oh well, then this is the only way we can do it, and we'll sacrifice ourselves, maybe do some bioterrorism, maybe people have attempted to poison water supplies. So yeah, I would think that would be the only way, because the one side obviously has all the guns. These people, the real crazies on the left, will probably just get even more crazy. And I thought that it would dwindle from like 30%, obviously, which was happening during the election. I thought it would go down to 20% of people who were just, there's no way you're going to change their mind. They're just, no matter how the economy is, no matter how anything goes, that they're just 20%. But I'm not seeing that. I mean, I think it's still at like 35% are just crazy, and they're going to stay that way. And it's going to, they're and get worse.
There's an organized movement, Major, that's going on about if Donald Trump is not impeached. There's people here in Salt Lake that held a rally, and it was covered on the nightly news. They were out there saying, we will take matters in our own hands. We'll take our country back. And that means even attacking state legislatures and this, because we cannot have America under this crazy man. Now, then on the other side of the coin, you have other side of people coming out to watch the protesters and saying, hey, we're supporting our government. We're going to fight with Trump. I turned to my wife and I said, honey, that looks like a recipe for disaster. Somebody starts pulling guns and popping caps. It spreads like wildfire. I mean, the rhetoric was like nothing I'd ever seen before. And then you look, I've been a history of the 5 or 6 years leading up to the American Civil War. The rhetoric started out just about like that. There was a hot powder keg of the slavery issue, okay, the moral issue. But now you got the same type of thing. You got the liberals on the left on the side. We need to protect everybody's ability to coexist, and Trump has no ability to do that. He's bad for everybody in America. So they think they're being patriotic. I guarantee you, the Southern sympathizers, I mean, General Robert E. Lee was a West Point graduate, for heaven's sakes, and a Christian who traveled and never had an engagement or a war where he didn't have a full day of prayer before he went to battle. You have a Christian General Robert E. Lee fighting against the Union forces marching to the battle hymn of the Republic, all about, God is with us. God is with, my goodness, it's ideologies. I see the exact same thing being fomented here. I really do.
Yeah, and I mean, on one side, you've got people who are generally more Christian. I would say the right certainly embraces Christianity more than the leftists, and the extreme leftists. I dare say that if you were at one of these Antifa meetings and you were getting all geared up and dressed up, ready to battle, you would be immediately ostracized if you offered to say a prayer before going into battle. They'd probably beat the hell out of you right then and there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
you're right. I mean,
it's weird.
What was so funny is I got the taste of that myself. I got so fed up with what was happening with the NSA and the Data Collection Center that a few of my friends says, what the heck? Let's just put out some network and let's just, on 4th of July, let's have a nice little 4th of July celebration saying we want, full disclosure. We have the rights of law of the land, and so we began to put out. This was like, oh golly, I talked about it on a few conservative radio talk shows here at K Talk Radio. I went on. I said we just want to if you're concerned at all about what's going on behind these barbed wire fences and razor wire, if you think this is okay, then don't come. But if you think this is a concern, have questions, please come. And we want to have this rally across the street from the main gate of the National Security Administration. They hadn't yet opened, okay? They were still in the process. And I told some of my experiences there on the radio about going to McDonald's across the street there and having the military personnel come in. Sweet people, I mean, good people. They're working there installing the computer networks, right? And one, Barbara Tavares was there. Her husband was, decorated Air Force flyer during the Vietnam era, American hero, I should say, by the way. And because of his credentials and his status as veteran, he would get invited at any Air Force base, whether it's Nellis in Vegas or Hill Air Force Base here in Utah. He went, the brass saw who he was, saluted him, sir, yes, sir, and you want to see anything on this base? We're wide open. We'll let you see and review our troops if you want. He had officer status. So here we went up to the gate of the NSA with the say. He said, I want to just say, here's my credentials as military. I want to see if I can just get an interview with the person in charge of this NSA, at least to see what. And so we tried that, and you know what? We doggone near got detained for a whole week. We were threatened with it. And the only thing that really saved us was because we were driving in a rental car. It wasn't our private vehicle, which they could have confiscated. And they told us that we were under arrest for trespassing. And Mr. Tavares was like, "Are you kidding me? This is not America. You work for us, the civilians. We have the right." And so I explained all this leading up to the protest. I said, we have no. We try to get some disclosure. We try to get some common ground. We were treated like we were the enemy. And this is Utah. This is the state of Utah. This is America. This is not right. So what happened? I got to tell you, we had a huge turnout. A huge turnout. It was more than I ever imagined. But there was the radical wing that came out. They were against the NSA because they didn't want any government intrusion on their freedom of the internet access, whatever that could be, the dark web, the porn, whatever. And so they were clearly, in their radical garb. They came out. And so when I called the gig, I wanted to explain what we were trying to do. And I says, we really need to have this peaceful. We need to show that we're above all this. But again, there were hundreds and hundreds of placards. The news media was there, and I said, let's not do this until we all are united in prayer. And my goodness, you're right. Oh, the screaming and the heckling. Well, this is not some religion meeting. And the screaming. It was like, are you kidding me? If we can't pray, then we have no business even being here. You see, I was just shocked by that. It was almost a riot. It was like the nihilists had infiltrated and didn't want anything to do with anything that had moral and integrity and biblical principles. I was stunned by that. I really was. It became almost a shouting match. Almost war erupted right there. Luckily, the highway patrol were there to keep the peace. Unbelievable, Major. It really was. You dare to say prayer in a public gathering? What's the matter with you? I was stunned I was shocked. I really was.
Yeah, and they're gonna. I mean, they're already talk about redoing the currency, removing God. We trust. They're not tearing down the statues is another popular thing. And it's modern day book burning. What they're doing with censorship on the internet. I just literally now got a. There was an affiliate program I was looking at, and you had to sign up to take a look at what their margins are and things like that. And for one of the sites that we're going to be launching, and because we were associated with the Goldwater, right? I just got an email saying, nope, we've removed you. And this it took them all of 2 days. And we haven't even used their service. I was just considering using it. And they said, well, because you've got they just referred to a generic category, with new category that we have called the body count, which is a Clinton body count. It's just articles on the major coincidence of getting Arkansas, And so, I mean, but that's how quick it goes. I mean, they're book burning. There's no difference, and shadow banning, and they're in the control of doing it. And tearing down these statues is popular, and changing and removing and editing is the big deal right now. So, but yeah, they want to remove God. They don't like God at all. Yeah. Be damned if you say anything bad about a mosque, going up. That's allowed. That's no problem. But yeah, if you're Christian, you're the enemy. So yeah, completely understand what you're saying there, True, and it all ties in. Looks like we got 1 minute.
1 minute left. Yeah, let me just again, folks, go and I read through this and this book by Christopher Story again. I had read it, golly, back when he sent it to me back, I think it was 2005 or 6. I loved it then. I said, oh my goodness, it's even more relevant today. A prophet has no honor in his own country, and Christopher Story was right on point with it. Major, thank you so much, and shout out to all the listeners that are with us worldwide. Share this in the archives. This is an important, I would submit, it's a very important topic to discuss, especially if things continue to deteriorate, as I bet they will, especially if Putin happens to come to Washington. Okay, this is going to just so polarizing. I'll tell you, it's amazing. It is what it is, folks. Thanks, Major. Again, thanks, Jim, and all those that simulcast with the podcast and the Goldwater Network. To all the 8chan writers and that. Again, give your prayers out. Prayers work. I'm telling you, prayers are important. And Alex Studer needs help. Needs some help. Other than short than just going to San Francisco myself, I don't know what else I can do. I'd love to get some NRA people involved. If he really just had a BB gun, this is an issue. This is a huge issue. There was no deadly weapon there other than little Ralphie maybe shooting his eye out with this Red Ryder BB gun. Incredible what America's come to. Thanks for listening, and I guess that's a wrap. Good night.
Okay, guys.